Igor Tudor has now officially been announced by the club as the interim boss.
I'm here not to enjoy, I'm here to work.
And still Ricky Villa! What a fantastic run! He scored!
Gascoigne going to have a crack. He is, you know. Oh, it's there!
Here's Lucas Moura! Oh, they've done it! The wait for silverware is over!
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Tottenham Way podcast. And this is going to be a very, very positive one. I know that the bottom line is Spurs are out of Europe, and who knows when we'll next be back in it. But goodness me, the manner of that performance against Atletico Madrid last night suddenly has me, and I suspect all of you, believing once again. I am Marcus Buckland in the company of George Sessions of the Press Association. George, okay, we've lost 7-5 on aggregate, 3-2 on the night. What a performance. 24 games, I think it is now, unbeaten at home in Europe. If only we could translate that into the league, we'd be world beaters. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, the brilliant performance of Archie Gray in particular, the growing development of Igor Tudor as our manager, there's something about him that I really quite like at the moment. But what was it in particular about that performance last night that A was so different and made it so different, do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's lovely to be on here talking about a win. God, do we go back to Borussia Dortmund or Frankfurt? 2 months ago, wasn't it, since we last spoke about a win and also a brilliant performance. I think that's the apologies, I've lost my my headphone there. I think the best thing about it for me was that Spurs attacked like Tottenham again. Some of the moves during that game were the Tottenham way, and we just haven't seen that, if we're being totally honest, really all season, let alone just the last few months. And, I'm more than happy to be humble pie with Igor Tudor, because I think we all felt like he was a dead man walking after the Atletico first leg. And the way it's turned around and the kind of positivity and belief and the feel-good factor that everyone, I think, associated with Tottenham now has, a whole week on from the Atletico first leg. It's remarkable, the turnaround. It really is. And there's so many, key individuals involved in that. Archie Gray, you mentioned, Xavi with a good performance. But Igor Tudor really has to take a lot of credit. And I think to see Spurs attacking like that gives me personally so much belief for the run-in, because I think the way we get out of this horrible mess we're in is by scoring goals. And we scored 3 last night against a very good Atletico team. And if we can do that against them, then we should be able to beat Forest. We should be able to beat Brighton. We should beat Leeds. We should beat Everton if we play like that. So, I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we got 3. We could easily have got more as well at 1-0. You just want that second goal to go in, and who knows what might have happened. I'm just going to read out a message from Jonathan Wood, George, who is a regular contributor to the Tottenham Way podcast. And he says, all you want to do is be proud of your club. They all fought, battled, scrapped for everything and worked their nuts off. They won a game from being pegged back twice. That should be huge for their confidence. Gray should only be a CM. He's wasted anywhere else. Lots of positives. Just hope they're not all too knackered for Sunday. Of course, it is Nottingham Forest at home on Sunday afternoon. Nottingham Forest play tonight. And of course, I think we all hope it goes to extra time and they're even more exhausted. Of course, they're facing a first leg deficit as well. But Igor Tudor, one actually thing that, it's a silly little thing really, but everyone kind of tried to take the mickey out of him on Sunday when he got a bit confused about who was or wasn't Arne Slot. But you spotted something before the game last night, which just helped me to start to really like the guy.
I think everyone is, these last few days, everyone's kind of, there's certain things that Igor Tudor has done, which has just made people kind of, I think, take to him that little bit more. And I was watching, just sort of looking out pre-match, and it really made me laugh. He walked up to Alan Dixon, Spurs' player liaison officer, who, I think we all believe he mistakenly thought was Arne Slot at Liverpool on Sunday. And he walked up to Alan Dixon pre-Atletico and put his arm around him, and they both sort of laughed and had a little joke about it. And I just thought that was brilliant, And look, I mean, I don't know about you, Marcus, but just kind of looking at that performance, I mean, I feel like that's probably our best 90-minute performance. What, since Man City? I know we've had lots of. There was some good second halves and first halves under Thomas Frank, and I'm kind of thinking of the recent ones, Frankfurt and Dortmund. But even in those games, it felt like there was passages where Spurs weren't really on it for the whole 90 minutes. But I really felt like, Spurs were better than Atletico last night. And yes, Atletico had some chances on the break and obviously scored 2 goals. But I really felt like Tottenham were constantly going for it. And I've got some of the stats here. 18 shots, 11 on target, an XG of 2.35, 51% possession. We want to have more possession as the home team. And yeah, I really think that's one of Spurs' best performances of the season. And I think maybe going all the way back to the Man City away game.
I would totally concur with that. I kept thinking this can't last. And, okay, we score, we don't get the second goal, which was essential. Then when they equalise, I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be a bit of an anticlimax. We go back in front again, Xavi, and we'll talk more about him. But in the Champions League in particular, he looks a different player. And then when they peg it back once more to 2-2, you're thinking, oh, okay, well, look, it would be great to get a positive result, even if we're going out of Europe. And to win the game was excellent. And those stats you've mentioned are really pertinent. I know also that in terms of the distance covered during the game, 116.3 Ks. Now, under Thomas Frank, we averaged 108. Under Tudor so far, it's 115. And a couple of people pointed out to me last night that they feel Spurs look fitter. That's only a few weeks, but maybe they are. So there are so many different aspects of that performance which were encouraging. It was the passing, I think, more than anything else, George. Some of those slick moves were classic Tottenham. And it was a reminder, we've got some really good players. And this is why the whole demise has been so bizarre. I'll even go as far as to mention Vicario, and I know his distribution's been awful, and some of his recent displays have been pretty wretched. But when I read that he's the worst goalkeeper that's ever been between the sticks at Tottenham, I find that a bit harsh, because he's got ability. And maybe Sunday was a classic example. He's at fault, no question, for the free kick. But then he makes a terrific save to stop us from going 2-0 down. And he came up with a couple more last night, one in particular after the deflection off Romero, where he has to sort of reposition himself at the last minute. I mean, clearly he's lost all his confidence. And perhaps it is Tudor. Somebody has got that confidence back. He's showing it. And the way they were flowing forward and just one-touch passes, that's what we want. And they're capable of it, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. And that has been the big frustration that I think we've all said we know there is good players in this team, but I think what you just had is one a kind of clearly there's the injury crisis has been a big part of it. You can't ignore that, but you've got an injury crisis and then morale which is super low. And I think you've mentioned the running stats. I think it probably has to be said that Spurs were not as fit as they probably certainly could have been, and probably should have been, I think, under Thomas Frank. Those running stats really surprised me. I actually got them up as well, Marcus, but we didn't compare notes clearly. Johnny Blaine on X is the one that tweeted that out. And it is, that is a big difference, almost 7 kilometres per game under Igor Tudor compared to Thomas Frank. And obviously Thomas Frank is a bigger sample size. But, when Igor Tudor came in, he did kind of put the players on a crash course of running. We saw the clips of them running, the reports of them doing the bleep test. And I think actually, if we kind of take out those first 2 games, which were really, really underwhelming, and I was disappointed with aspects of Crystal Palace, but maybe the red card makes it hard to judge. Maybe that kind of fitness is now into the players. And, I think there was points last night where they got tired around the 70th minute mark. And I was kind of thinking, please just hang on and get the win, because for morale and for kind of remembering how to win again, it will be so important. And I think Jed Spence looked really knackered around 75, 80. But then right at the death, you've got him making that lung-busting run to stop, a third goal potentially going in. And look, that is going to be key. And Spurs have only got now 1 game a week for the rest of the season. But if the players can get to that much more optimal fitness, that clearly that hasn't been the case, it's going to make a huge difference. And I guess just rounding off on Vicario, what I sort of wanted from this game on Wednesday was for Spurs to preserve this unbeaten run in Europe, because I didn't want another record to be given to this squad. So for them to keep that 25 games unbeaten now at home in Europe, which is a really, really impressive feat. And I also wanted them to get the win. And Vicario saves in the first half, but also the second half when there was some tired legs. Julian Alvarez gets in behind Jed and Mickey van der Ven, but Vicario stands up tall and makes a big save. Vicario played his part last night, and hopefully with his kind of, it feels like his distribution has been a little bit simplified, I think, over the last week. Maybe as a result of what happened to Tony Kinski in Madrid. If Vicario has not got to worry about passing the ball out with his feet, and he's just got to worry about mainly shot stopping and obviously corners and free kicks, hopefully we're going to see a much better version of Vicario than we have done in the last few months.
Yeah. In terms of those running stats, if Igor Tudor told me to run, I would run, because the guy is an ogre bellowing from the touchlines. But excellent. And actually the frustration of this tie, I mean, okay, it's going to sound stupid because we conceded 5 goals in the first leg, but we know, George, what happened in the first 22 minutes. The fact that we're 4-0 down, some very unfortunate individual errors. I actually feel that aside from that, and maybe I'm just mad, I think we're better than Atletico. I think we could have gone through. And that's despite the fact they've got some terrific players. And you mentioned Julian Alvarez. I seem to recall we were once linked with him. Mind you, we've been linked with everybody over the last 30 years. What a terrific player he is. But yeah, we lose 7-5 on aggregate. I thought, match them pretty much. And if Kinski hadn't had those awful moments and Van der Ven hadn't fallen on his backside early on, we could easily have got a draw, I think, in Madrid last week. Maybe lost 3-2. That game would have got into extra time last night. That would have been tough. But yeah, some really, really encouraging aspects. And I think none more so than Archie Gray. We heard what Jonathan Wood had to say. I mean, Gray has played in every position conceivable, just about. We know, obviously, now where his best position is. Do you think this is going to be the start of an immense career for this young man in the centre of midfield?
Yeah, I really do. And look, I'm certainly not always right about things. I think I was definitely wrong about Igor Tudor, and I hope he continues to prove me wrong. But I knew I was going to be right about Archie Gray. I think I've said it for a long time on this pod over this season. He has got so much ability, and he's going to be, he could potentially be a superstar for Tottenham if we can look after him, develop him, give him a manager that's going to develop him. And yeah, I think that was probably his best performance in the Spurs shirt. And there was just, he has really grown so much, I think, over these probably in particular these last few weeks, I'd say. The kind of end of Thomas Frank's reign and the start of Igor Tudor's reign. And he's just, I think what's really pleasing for me is he's now actually delivering a lot more quality on the ball. I think he's always had the energy. He's always had that kind of drive and that intensity to his game. But I think often there's been a question mark, and probably fairly so, about can he really be a top midfielder, because what does he do on the ball? He just keeps it simple. But I think you're seeing now so much more of his kind of confidence flowing, first of all, but actually how many times is he in those tight spaces and he has quick feet and he jinks out? Reminds me a little bit of Luka Modric, which I'm not saying he's going to be Luka Modric, but just his ability to manoeuvre the ball and get out of those tight spaces. And, I think for Xavi's first goal, he nips in, anticipates the ball so well, which he does really well all the time. Quick passes with Pape Sarr into Xavi, and obviously it's a brilliant finish from Xavi, but it is all from Archie Gray just leading from the front. And I loved it when he got substituted. I think plenty of people have seen it now, but Marcus Llorente, the Atletico midfielder, made a point of going over to him and shaking his hand. And then Archie had to do the long walk around the pitch, and he probably was knackered and didn't want to do it. But I would imagine that the reception he got from that South stand, who went crazy for him, would have just, again reaffirmed how much he is really adored by our fan base. And yeah, I sort of hope from now on that he plays every game in centre midfield for the rest of this season, because I think his performances not only are deserving of it, but I think, touch wood, Spurs do get out of this situation. It's a great chance for him to develop and him to really nail that position for the next manager that comes in, whether it is Igor Tudor or Pochettino or whoever. Archie Gray definitely needs to be, one of the first names on the team sheet, I think, going forward. And I guess just a final call to arms, I guess, for the fans that go to games, we've got to get a song for Archie Gray. I think that the South Stand sort of tried to do something last night. I couldn't really hear it so well. I don't know if it was that there's only one Archie Gray, but he needs a song, that boy, because he is dragging Spurs out of the mess.
Can I please make a very obvious suggestion here? As you all know, my hero was Steve Archibald, and we used to sing, "We'll take more care of you, Archibald." Well, we can simply change that to "We'll take more care of you, Archie Gray." It's a no-brainer. I'm going to start it, and you need to follow on up in the press box. That's the way forward. The same old song from 40 years ago, but he has sacrificed himself, obviously, this season. George, he's had to play in so many different positions, and he has got some stick from individuals, but wow. Yeah, he was absolutely brilliant. Just in terms of the formation, because when I saw the lineup last night, I'm thinking, right, we've got Dragusin, we've got Van der Ven, and we've got Romero. He's going to play a back three again. But am I right in saying, and I know you actually spoke to Tudor about this, essentially, was it a 4-2-3-1?
Yeah, it's quite hard to work out, but I think what you can definitely say is it was not three at the back. I think we all saw the team sheet and just assumed, we've got Dragusin, Romero and Van der Ven, it's going to be three at the back. You've got two fullbacks there in Jed Spence and Pedro Porro. But Rado Dragusin definitely played right back last night. I've sort of looked at I kind of thought it was 4-4-2 initially once the game starts. But really, actually, Xavi is coming quite central, and Matisse Tel is going out wide to the left. So I think you probably say it's a 4-2-3-1, but Pedro's a bit more withdrawn. But look, I think, and I asked Igor Tudor about this, and understandably, he was quite coy about formations and systems. Probably doesn't want to give too much away, but this has definitely, I think, helped the players for him to go to four at the back, and it wasn't necessarily two up front last night, but it's certainly players much more closer to the central forward in Colomwani last night, and at Liverpool it was Richarlison and Dom Solanke up top closer together. I think it probably needed to be simplified in this situation, given the loss of morale and the way the results had been. 8 without a win before this fantastic result, and that has helped. And I think that going forward, I'm intrigued to see what he does for Liverpool, because Kevin Danso has been a real warrior for Spurs during
For Forest, you mean? For Forest, we haven't got to worry about Liverpool again, thank God.
Thankfully, although maybe we'd win next time, you never know. No, for this Forest game, I'm intrigued to see what he does, because I think Kevin Danso has been a real warrior for Spurs during this period, and I kind of I wonder if maybe Kevin Danso comes in and plays right back actually, and he sort of keeps a similar shape. And I guess on the surface, you'd say that's a bit of a strange move, but actually it reminds me, and Tom Walnut said this to me actually last night, when Pep and Man City were really struggling last season, there was a point where Pep just played sort of, I don't know if it was 4 centre-backs, but he definitely was just playing basically 3 centre-backs. And it wasn't a 3 at the back, one of them is more as either a right back or a left back, but it just gives you that kind of solidity in defence. And certainly when you're struggling at both ends of the pitch, you just need to kind of shore things up. And I think the formation has done that the last couple of games, and certainly Dragusin is not a right back, but he made a good effort last night, and really he was one of a number of players. I think it was a real team effort. There were certainly individuals like Archie that really flourished, but it was a real team effort. And I think the 4-2-3-1 or 4-4-2, whatever you want to call it, is certainly working. So I hope he sticks with that going forward.
Yeah, and pushing Porro forward a little bit, I think, plays to his strengths as well. You've always been a big fan of Archie Gray. You've also always been a big fan of Matthias Tel. I have as well. For whatever reason, Thomas Frank just did not use him enough. And there was that really interesting interview that Tel gave a couple of weeks ago saying, I just didn't get my opportunity. We saw at times last night what a fine player he can be. I also got incredibly frustrated with him, George, and I had to remember he's still a young guy, because he produces moments of brilliance. The cross that leads to the opening goal for Kolo Muani, but then a chance to make it 2-0. I mean, yeah, ifs, buts and maybes. Had Spurs gone 2 up at that stage, who knows? But he seems to be developing, and it does make it all the more curious that for whatever reason, Thomas Frank just didn't seem to fancy him.
I know, with every passing week, it looks Tell didn't start a single game in November and December. And, every man and his dog was tried as a left midfielder by Thomas Frank during those first few months. And it just beggars belief that he never tried Tell. And I did want him to give him a run, because I felt the kind of performances in October when he played well at Leeds, and they did okay against Aston Villa, I think it was, as a central striker starting. He definitely deserved more minutes during that period. And look, you're right. I think he probably should pass to Archie Gray in that moment. He is a forward. He's going to have that kind of selfish streak. If he hasn't got that, he's probably not got to this position. And I'm not entirely sure he looks up. You'd like to think, as a young player, obviously, was he 20? I think maybe 21, or soon to be 21. That develops in time. But I think he certainly brings so much more positives than negatives at the minute. I just love, and it doesn't matter what the scoreline is, what the kind of state of the team is, what the form is. He is always so direct, and he always has that self-belief. It is sort of unrelenting, isn't it? And I think if you're a fullback, whether he gets tackled the first 3 times out of 3 against a fullback, he's going to keep going at you, and fullbacks do not like that. And I think there was a bit of frustration with other, I'm not going to throw him on the bus, with other wingers at Tottenham this season, that they just wouldn't keep going at the fullback. But with Tell, he's always going to do it, and he only has to get past him once, and then you get in there and you can create a moment. And his cross for Colomwani's header is fantastic. And yeah, I feel like with Tell, I'm really pleased, firstly, for him that he's getting these run of games and he's making an impact. But I do feel he's going to have a big moment. I feel like he's the sort of player, a little bit like Archie. I think there's going to be a moment in this run where Tell's really going to stamp his mark. And I kind of hope it's a little bit like the kind of Harry Kane moments that we've seen. A young player gets in a team and they need to produce that big moment, which makes everyone stand up and take notice. And I think Tell's going to do that. I really hope he does during these next couple of months, because he's got the ability. It's just the consistency in his game, which is not going to be there as a young player, clearly. But I really do feel he's got a big moment up his sleeve, and be a good time if he did it against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, it would. And actually, the other big positive about him is that he doesn't get injured. And that's probably the kiss of death now. But I think he's the only player in the whole squad who's remained fit all season. You mentioned Harry Kane, by the way. What an astonishing goal he scored. Got a couple last night. If you haven't seen, was it his first? I can't remember if it was his first or his second. But, the skill and the finish. Oh, Harry, stop wasting your time in that silly Mickey Mouse league and come back and do something proper at Tottenham next season, please. So Tell, massive tick. Now, George, whenever I see Eberechi Eze do something half decent, and he got lucky a couple of nights ago with that thunderous opener for Arsenal, I start to think of Xavi, because they're aligned in many ways. And he's hardly had a look in under Igor Tudor. I don't think he can really complain too much either, the way he has been playing. And yet there seem to be two Xavis, the Xavi in the Premier League and the Xavi in the Champions League, and there are obvious reasons why he can look a much better player on the continental stage. But again, when you see some of the things he did last night, I get so frustrated that we don't see more of that on a regular basis. I also know that he's often been played out of position, and if you're a good enough player, it shouldn't matter that much. But do you think, again, that Tudor has now fully appreciated, like with Archie Gray, exactly where Xavi is likely to shine, and we're going to see him operate in the same role for the rest of this season?
Yeah, he's an enigma, isn't he, Xavi? I won't pretend. I do really like him, and I do think the kind of talent and the ability he's got is going to mean in the long run he's going to be a really good player for Spurs. I certainly hope that anyway. But yeah, he's been frustrated, and I think it is absolutely fair to say that Igor Tudor has not fancied him during these last few weeks. He spoke about knowing who needs to be on the boat and who's going to be off it, and I think Xavi was maybe off it after that Fulham performance. I don't necessarily think he was diabolical at Fulham, but I just think he didn't do what Igor Tudor wanted in that left midfield position, and as a result found himself out of the team for sort of games you'd maybe expect him to play, Atletico away, Crystal Palace at home. But he put his hand up last night. I didn't actually think it was his best performance for Spurs, funnily enough. I think he produced wonderful finish, and as the game wore on, he got better and better. But there was aspects of it. He still has that kind of sloppiness with his passing,
Yeah.
and it's really frustrating that. And I guess similar vein to Tell, I just kind of hope that he's only 22, isn't he? He's a young player, that as he kind of grows and develops more, that you see that less often. With players in that position, they're going to give the ball away. That is going to happen. But I think it's just the kind of manner of some of the passes he gives away, or the touches, which just kind of frustrates fans. But I think he will take a lot of confidence, I think, from last night. And he's got 5 goals and 5 assists now for Tottenham. He clearly wants better numbers than that, I would have thought. And 4 of them are in the Champions League, 4 of those goals. If he can kind of start producing that kind of level in the Premier League, it's only going to help Tottenham. And I kind of am in 2 minds on whether he starts against Nottingham Forest on Sunday. I think he probably has done enough to warrant it. And obviously Igor Tudor hasn't got a load of options, but you can see the kind of argument of why you'd want to keep him on the bench, as the two Toms discussed on the last week, and bringing him on to kind of take a game by the scruff of the neck against tired defenders. That's a real conundrum that Igor Tudor's going to have to kind of debate. But yeah, it was a big performance for him. And I think as fans, there's been so much frustration and anger, and just a real kind of lack of disbelief about the situation over these last few weeks. And understandably, people are looking at who can you blame, and I think Xavi's taken some of the blame because he's a £52 million player and he's not delivered what we wanted, certainly not consistently. And then he's found himself out of the team, and you kind of question, how much does someone like him care? But I think he showed last night how much he does, and he was really trying to whip up the crowd. And I think that's the other thing, Marcus, which I'm sure we'll come into, that you just felt that connection with the crowd again last night. And I really wanted Tottenham to win this Atletico game. And I think it was around the 88th minute where it's 2-2 and Spurs look a bit tired, and the South Stand sort of kicks into when the Spurs go marching in. And it made me proud to be a Tottenham fan, because we're going out at that point 7-4 in aggregate, and yet you've got the 50,000 fans that were there singing and getting behind this group of players that haven't won in at that point it's going to be 9 games, and lo and behold, the fans get behind them, and then it gives them that boost to get the penalty and to get the win. And there's a lot of plans in place for the Nottingham Forest game in terms of the fans, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But
Yes.
I did feel like last night that kind of that sort of connection, it's not completely back, is it? Clearly, because it's been a horrible season, but it was kind of the first steps to really rebuilding that, and that's going to be so important, isn't it, over the next 2 months?
I mean, Spurs fans get so much stick. Some of it may be a little bit justified, but when you see or think about what we've had to endure over a long period of time at home in particular, it's no great surprise. Spurs fans are incredibly loyal. They are passionate. We heard from Jonathan at the start of the show. You said it as well. As long as the team looks to do the right things, they'll be forgiven for everything else. And it's just been such negativity that's been served up on a regular basis that's led to all the cynicism. And the fact that through the years, as we've discovered this week, George, I mean, actually, we were champions back in, the 2016-17 season? It's stuff like that keeps on happening, and no wonder over a period of time as a Spurs fan you become a very bitter and twisted individual, if you're like me. But we'll continue to stay positive here. There's no point dwelling on anything negative. And actually, talking of positives, one thing I was going to say, and have you got an answer for this with regards to Xavi? And you're quite right. I mean, he produced some wonderful sparkling moments at times, but this inability to, or let's phrase this the right way, the fact that for whatever reason he does give the ball away so often. I mean, for such a talented player, I'm trying to work out why that happens. Is he over-ambitious? Is he still a little lacking in confidence and not quite knowing what to do? Why does a 50+ million player at times look as average as he does and make some basic errors to which we have become accustomed?
Yeah, it is a hard one to assess. To sort of nick one of Igor Tudor's phrases about the glass half full or the glass half empty, as he said the other week. If I'm glass half full with Xavi, I'm saying he's fizzing in passes to people which he expects they'll be there, like he had at PSG, like he had at Barcelona. And he's at a Tottenham team which have not won in not won in the Premier League in 2026. So players are not in those positions that he is expecting to fizz passes to. But I think I'm probably being a little bit generous to Xavi there. I think it's maybe the intensity of the Premier League, and it is so demanding, it is so physical that fatigue, fatigue sets in much quicker, and it only has to be, you only have to be a little bit more fatigued than he probably would have been in the Bundesliga per se, and that kind of pass, that easy pass that you just stroke out to the left to Archie Gray, you sort of drag that pass and it goes out for a throw, and then it is a terrible pass and it's just sloppy again. So I sort of wonder if it's kind of him trying to get up to the levels of the Premier League, and the intensity. But actually talking about Xavi, and another big tick in the box of Igor Tudor, Callum Olasese comes on, Spurs Academy graduate, 19 years old, brings him on at Anfield for 20 minutes. That's not a token gesture. That is because he's seen something in him. And I've seen a clip of Callum's highlights at Anfield, and I thought he looked really assured. And then again, he does the same last night, and it's Callum Olasese's pass into Xavi, a lovely little prod back to him, and Xavi runs onto it and wins the penalty. And yeah, really pleased that, again, I'm kind of getting frustrated with Thomas Frank not playing Matisse Tell. There's some really talented young players at Spurs, and Igor Tudor is turned into them. James Rousewell is the other one, who probably unexpected to come on at Liverpool and kind of shake hands with the referee and walk off, but all of a sudden he's involved in a Liverpool counter-attack, and the way he held up, I think it was Ekitike, made a big difference in that moment. And I think Igor Tudor is going to use these kids, and fair play to him. These young players, maybe they're not going to go on and play 100, 200 games for Tottenham, but they've spent their whole life in Tottenham's academy. They love this club. It means a great deal to them, and they are good technically players. They might go to League One and struggle with the physicality, but actually the technically on the technical side of things, they're very good players. So I hope that Igor Tudor does continue to use them. It's a real shame. I'm sure lots of fans are sort of thinking, where's Janai Byfield? Where's Luca Williams-Barnett? They've both got little minor problems, unfortunately. I've sort of...
Hang on, George. Little minor problems. Do you mean they're out for a season and a half?
They're back in 2027. I'd like to think they'll both be available for after the Forest game, where we've got a 3-week break. But it's a shame that those two guys aren't available, because I think, given their quality, and I'm sure they would have impressed Igor in training when they were fit, I'm sure they would have got some minutes. But it's just another little tick in the right direction, that Igor Tudor has done over these last few days, to turn to the academy players and trust them. And look, they've not let him down, have they, so far? No. And look, Spurs will get players back over the next weeks and next month or so. But if those young players are needed, and I'm sure probably Callum might be again on Sunday for the Nottingham Forest game, I hope Igor turns to them, because they have the ability, and they just need an opportunity, as we've seen so many times over the years.
Yeah, I'll ask you about Dominic Solanke when we turn our attention to the Nottingham Forest game. You mentioned Tom Barkley's comments about Xavi and the value of having a dangerous player coming off the bench. If you didn't hear the reaction to the Liverpool game, the two Toms spoke in detail, I thought were fascinating, as well, about Xavi's role possibly coming from the bench. Do listen back to that. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us on the Tottenham Way pod. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to have some form of a chat during this big break in fixtures in March. So if you've got any specific questions you want to throw at us, any general observations, we love to hear from you. Please do get in touch. And it'll be interesting to see whether Xavi does start at the weekend. Now, just in terms actually of the foul, the possible foul on Xavi that was overlooked by the officials, George, and Atleti broke up field and scored a very good goal. I've already mentioned what a fine player Alvarez is. Am I clutching at straws to suggest that Spurs should have been given a free kick, and therefore prevented that Atleti break?
I think I might be in the minority, but I didn't really think it was a free kick. I kind of thought it's one of those where a player's taken a shot, but he's in Xavi, but he's already kind of going down, and yeah, he gets a little shove. I'm not sure it sort of makes a huge difference. I think he's kind of off balance anyway and going down anyway. But I think, yeah, clearly a lot of fans felt that was a foul. I think Igor Tudor spoke about it after the game. But yeah, I didn't think it was I didn't think it was a real clear-cut, obvious foul. And VAR did check it actually very briefly. So they didn't think. I mean, for me, it's definitely never going to be enough to overturn the goal. I think if trying to think of the opposite scenario. I don't think it's enough clear cut to sort of disallow the goal. Frustratingly as that is for Tottenham. I didn't think the referee was great, to be honest, but we'll save that referee moaning for another day.
Oh yeah, there'll be plenty of other opportunities to slag off referees. Much as I wish to disagree with you, I think you're probably right. It was, he'd already taken the shot. He was going down, and I mentioned Alvarez several times. I think he's a fantastic player. Be interesting to see how Atletico Madrid get on against Barcelona in the quarterfinals. They've actually knocked them out the last two times they've played against each other. Just before we look ahead to Forest, some really interesting quotes from Van de Ven in the build-up to the game. He clearly wanted to get a point across, saying that some reporters, most certainly not George Sessions or Tom Barkley or Tom Allnut, occasionally seem to make up stories. We never make up anything here. It's ridiculous, said Van der Ven, to suggest that Spurs players don't care. Now, that was good to hear. It was good to read. Do you think that did genuinely come from the heart?
Yeah, I think so. And look, I think actually quite a lot of players have spoke over these last few days. And I just think it all kind of adds to a real kind of positivity growing and kind of, that goodwill that needs to come back from, the fans need to be able to give more goodwill to the players. But the players certainly need to, give something to get the goodwill back. And I was pleased that, I was quite surprised that Mickey van der Ven was put up to do the press conference. And I was kind of thinking, oh God, what way is this going to go? But yeah, I thought he really set the tone, I think, for that match, talking about how much it means to the players and how, the staff, the players, the manager, we all do care about this situation. There is not people that are just walking around the training ground that don't care. And I think, Marcus, I'm sure you have heard it. I've heard the clip on a podcast, the name escapes me, talking about how Van der Ven, was supposedly the player that was saying he's going to get a move in the summer. And, I'd like to think that isn't true. And I hope that isn't true. But that just isn't helpful, is it, right now? And I'm glad that Van der Ven brought that up himself and shut it down, and just spoke about how he hasn't been good enough lately. And I think you sort of need that acknowledgement in times like this. I think the reason sometimes there's a massive distance between players and fans is because you just can't connect to them. They feel so far away from you with what the wages they're earning, that kind of accountability and that sort of touch of reality, really, that this is the fans' club and players can move on, but the fans will always be there. And I think for Mickey to talk about how he knows his performances of late haven't reached the level, and just little things, saying how he watched the Liverpool game and he was kind of screaming at his TV even when Richie scores, that makes him feel like a human being, because that's what we were all doing. When Richie scores that goal, we're all screaming and jumping up the sofa thinking, God, we're not lost. And Mickey, by the sound of it, was doing the same.
Can I just point out, this is me being a real panicker, but I still thought we would lose. I mean, we were playing so well in that second half in particular, but it wouldn't have been the first time that Spurs had looked to be getting something at Anfield. I was convinced that Liverpool were going to go up the other end and nick an unfortunate minute. But yeah, sorry, I take your point entirely and ignore me. Go back to what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for James Rousewell, maybe they would have done. But thankfully that didn't happen. But yeah, I just think Mickey's comments, sort of shutting down the suggestion that these players don't care and making it clear that he hasn't been good enough and he knows he needs to help Spurs out of this situation was important. But, even before that, I think it was the Monday night or sort of the Tuesday morning, Pedro Porro did an interview with Spanish media outlet AS. And, understandably, Spanish international, he's asked the question, Barcelona and Real Madrid are being linked. And I think the way he answered that, I've read some of his quotes now. Right now I'm not thinking about going back to Spain. I'm focused on getting through this, getting through it somehow. When you're young, you dream about the biggest clubs. I'm at one now. And even though things aren't going well for us, we have to get out of it. And I think he, again, it's very easy in that situation. He could have done a come and get me plea, but he didn't. I think the players have recognised the situation, and the final one is Romero at Atletico. Those links have been there for a long time. Romero did the mix zone on Wednesday night and was asked about Atletico. And again, he shut it down. He said he's got great affection for Tottenham, and his only focus now is getting Tottenham out of this situation. And I know it is just words and we need actions, but they're the right words we want to be hearing right now. You definitely didn't want your captain 3 days out from one of the biggest games the club have had in the Premier League for a long, long time, sort of flattering his eyelids at Atletico, and he didn't, Cuti Romero.
No.
So it just sort of adds to this being a positive week. The Liverpool result, these key players that we all kind of wonder and worry and think they might just piss off in the summer, essentially saying that they know the situation, they know they need to get Spurs out of it, and now this win. And Spurs just got to round off what would be a hell of a week by beating Nottingham Forest on Sunday. But there's just this, I don't know about you, Marcus, but I feel lighter talking about Tottenham. I feel lighter thinking about Tottenham. Yeah, we have got good players. We can get out of this. And I certainly didn't feel like that a week ago. It's mad what a couple of good performances and results can do.
Well, it is, and in that same manner, being the pessimist I am, I don't want to get too carried away before Sunday, but I'm certainly glad that Romero was not fluttering his eyelids at Atletico Madrid in the way that Diego Simeone appeared to be fluttering his at Romero, with some very positive comments about the Tottenham captain in the build-up to the match, without wishing to stray into anything negative. And you touched upon the fact that Van der Ven himself has admitted he's not been playing well enough lately. A friend of mine said in the middle of the game, he doesn't like Spurs, so he's going to be cynical, but he said, Romero's a liability for you guys. I mean, there were a couple of juddering challenges. I mean, I said, shut up, But I'm always worried, George, because we know that, one badly timed challenge could lead to another red card and Armageddon, all the rest of it. Are you a little concerned that Romero and Van der Ven have been undercooked of late and obviously have really got to step up to the plate? Now, what did you make in general of their performances last night?
No, I thought actually they were really good. I thought Romero was really good, actually. Think of I think it's the first half where Llorente gets in behind and he's trying to pick out when Romero gets back to make the block. There was 2 tackles in the second half, brilliant tackles by Romero that stopped, I think, Julian Alvarez for certainly one of them, and that looked like a certain goal. I thought Romero he wasn't kind of at Archie Gray's level or maybe at Tell's level. He didn't stand out that much, but I thought he really led from the front last night. And I think I was talking about his stats the other week on the pod. Spurs just win so many more games when Christian Romero's in their team. I can't get the stats up for me, but I think it was something like that. Spurs had won 2 out of the 13 he'd missed before the Atletico first leg, and they'd won 7 of the 25. These not exactly exact numbers when he does plays. I think he just brings an air of calmness and an air of authority in defence. And I know he's rash at times with these tackles, sometimes a little bit unfairly treated, I think, by referees. But hopefully, if he can stay available for these 8 games, and the good thing for him is that he's on 8 yellow cards, I think, in the Premier League. And actually, him missing Liverpool means there's 2 games less for him, 1 game less, for him to get to 10. The cut-off point for 10 is match round 32. This weekend will be match round 31 with Nottingham Forest. So as long as he doesn't get a booking against Forest and then another one against Sunderland, he won't get a 2-match ban on top of that, which would be huge, wouldn't it, if he can get through that. So, no, I thought he was good last night. And Mickey van der Ven made a wonderful challenge in the second half as well. And it kind of reminded me of sort of vintage Mickey van der Ven. And look, his confidence has been low. There's no doubt about it. Slipped in Atletico, sent off against Crystal Palace. Some difficult performances before that as well. But that'll be good for both of them last night to be back in the team, back together. They helped Spurs get a win. To see that kind of feeling with the fans at full time, and hopefully them 2 can stay fit and available now for the rest of the season. And as I kind of said before, save their legacy, keep Spurs up, and we can all forget about this horrible season and just pretend it's been a nightmare.
Please, let's be able to do that. So, Forest on Sunday afternoon. They've already beaten us 3-0 this season. As we record this, we don't know what's happened to them in the second leg of their Europa League round of 16 encounter. Vitor Pereira's already been to Tottenham once this season, and I vividly recall actually thinking that Wolves looked quite good when they picked up a 1-1 draw. Of course, he didn't win a game before being sacked there. They've got some quick players. They have got some ability, George, and we've sort of wondered whether Danso might come, what the lineup might be. What's your hunch as to what is going to unfold on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, well, look, Spurs owe Forest from that December game because Spurs were rudderless in that game, weren't they? And I think maybe in hindsight, Thomas Frank maybe should have gone after that because the ship was already sinking at that point. And look, Forest do have some quality players. Elliot Anderson is a wonderful footballer. Morgan Gibbs-White, we all know how good he is, and I think certainly Spurs would like to probably would still like to sign him in the summer if Forest did go down. But they're not in a great run, Forest. I think they've been playing pretty fairly well under Vitor Pereira, but their last Premier League win was 2 months ago, January 25th. I've got it here. They've lost to Leeds, they've lost to Liverpool, lost to Brighton during the last couple of weeks. They're not in the best of form. They're not free flowing. They're not winning loads of games. But it's going to be a battle. It's going to be a real. Probably going to be a horrible game to watch. There's going to be a lot of tension. But Spurs will have Richarlison back. That's important. He's had a whole week to prepare for this game. I always feel like he's better when he's had a week to prepare, and he's been our real fighter, hasn't he, in this period? I think actually Igor Tudor said post-match last night that Dom Solanke had a problem with his hip, but he had some sort of confidence he would be available for the Forest game. So that would be important, even if he's just on the bench. I think Palhinha may be back in the frame. Obviously, Udogie and Lucas Bergvall played against Atletico, so that there is suddenly options on the bench for Igor Tudor. And I think it's probably going to be a real big unified effort, isn't it? It's going to be the 11 players on the pitch, but it's going to be the substitutes, and of course it's going to be the fans in the stand.
Yes.
And I know there's lots going on off the field with the fans, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but I think if everyone can pull together and Spurs can show the quality and the individual brilliance that they did against Atletico, I think they can win this game. And if we do win this game, boy, it would have been a good week.
Oh, yes, it would. Solanke, never injured. I think he probably had a couple of knocks in times gone by, but never really injured before he came to Spurs. And now it's just one little thing after another. And of course, we've all become very cynical when we hear that it's a little problem and then the player disappears for months on end. But this is such a shame because we know his value, not just what he does, but how he brings other players into the team as well. So I sincerely hope it is only a little problem here, George, because as good as Richarlison is when a relegation dogfight is on, we know we can't entirely rely upon him, and he could get another knock as well. So hopefully you can find out a bit more about Solanke's situation ahead of the game.
Yeah, see, the trouble for Solanke, and this is kind of my fear with Maddison and Dejan Kulusevski, who I have to be honest, I have big doubts about them playing any part of the season. But Dominic Solanke didn't play a single game from August until, January. When you miss that long period of football, when you return, you do not return the player you were pre the injury. You've got to build the fitness up, and where you've not been playing matches at the intensity of the Premier League for so long, you get little problems. You get a little problem with your knee, you get a little problem with your hip, because the body's not used to playing Premier League matches and European football on top of that for the last 5-6 months. And this is the trouble. And this is the trouble with all the players coming back for Spurs, that they've missed big chunks. I mean, Destiny Dog is not so bad in the sense that he's only missed 5 weeks. But unfortunately, he's very injury prone these days. But you kind of hope that with Lucas Bergvall now being back, Mohamed Kudus, who hopefully is going to return after the March international break, that they can really get in a body of fitness into them. That's so when they come back, they can stay fit, because that's the hard bit. Solanke's came back in the middle of January, and he's playing every 3 days when his body's not been used to one game, in 4 months, let alone every 3 days. But yeah, hopefully it is only a small problem for him. I think, when we talk about players caring and not caring, I think a lot of these players will be playing through the pain. I think Kevin Danso, me and Tom were talking about him getting a big whack in the Atletico first leg. And I don't know this, but I'm probably sure last night he was kind of rested because he is in pain. Solanke's probably played through pain. I'd imagine Richarlison has, given he's only just come back. Same for some of the other guys. They're all going to be weary. All their bodies are not going to be 100%, but they're putting their sort of their bodies on the line for the cause, and that's what we want to see. And hopefully Solanke can play in this Nottingham Forest game, and then the England squad will be announced on Friday. He may be in it. I probably kind of hope he's not in it, to be honest. And then all the players back at Hotspur Way can really build fitness-wise for the last chunk of the season to make sure they stay fit.
Yeah, well, there is a good little break. So, post that international break, with any luck, Igor Tudor, assuming he's still there, will have a lot more options. And actually, it's the one thing that strikes me. I mean, of course, it's essential we don't go down, but assuming we don't, and hopefully, I do worry about Dan Kulusevski because we just don't know what's happening with him. But being optimistic, or we are being optimistic today, starting next season, George, it'll be like having two new signings. If Kulusevski and Maddison are available to start again, and Solanke has a summer to build himself up. So there are reasons to be optimistic. But yeah, this is going to be such a nerve-wracking game. The fans have got to play their part. The show up, sing up, stay up movement that has been set up by the club. I picture you at 11:30 in the high road with all your Tottenham gear on, having done your pre-match piece, leading the singing, George.
I'll be there with flair, waving it like Richarlison was for the open top bus parade. No, look, we spoke about it a little while ago, Marcus. I think maybe after the Arsenal pod, saying how this is such a dire situation. We sort of need to take a leaf out of Everton's book. They turned Goodison Park into a real fortress and cauldron of noise during their, many relegation battles, and it always got the team over the line. And I think there's players. I think Andros Townsend has spoken in detail about kind of what it was like for the players being on the bus and seeing all the fans around and how much they were behind the team and what a difference it made. And I think that you're right. This sort of fan. I think it's a fan movement, to be honest. Show up, sing up, stay up. And what's brilliant about it is that there's so many Tottenham fan groups that have really merged together and all sort of unified for the greater cause. There's Return of the Shelf, which has been trying to get a singing section in the South Stand. Tottenham Hotspur Football Club flags. The Supporters Trust, the Fan Advisory Board. Change for Tottenham, who've protested against the ownership. They've all come together to create this movement where essentially they want fans, dressed in white to get behind the team, to sort of gather around. I think it's the bricklayers and the coach and horses for around 11:30 on Sunday. And they want to create a really, powerful, visual image and really create a big noise and a big racket for when the team bus, the Spurs team bus wheels in, to show those players, what a big game this is and how much they're behind the team. And I've heard as well that the club have been really supportive with this. I think actually, I think Billy T, many people will follow on X. I heard him speaking about this recently, saying how often actually the players don't all go on the team bus. Some of them drive in, but the club have said to all the players, we want you all to be on the team bus this time. They're going to let the fans know the route of the bus as well. And I think they've put up sort of ramps just to kind of help with crowd safety, assuming there is big numbers. So look, we've all of us, the fans as well, we've all criticised the club at points. The fans have been criticised at points. But in the hour of need, everyone is coming together and pulling together. And I really think, a real raucous atmosphere outside the ground. The players being on the bus, seeing that, will kind of really get a lot of energy, you'd like to think. And if it can make 5% difference, that could be the key between getting over the line against Forest or dropping points. So, well done to the fans. I really, really hope I'm sure it will come off. I'm sure a lot of people will see that and get behind the players and really make a wonderful atmosphere. And if it can get us the win we all desperately want to see in the Premier League, it'll be it'll be fantastic for match of the day Sunday night and the days that follow, and all the media outlets to be talking about the Spurs fans making a big difference and not being critical of our club as has often been the case in the last few months.
Well, of course, there is, as we mentioned, a big gap after the game. Spurs have had a terrible habit in recent seasons of losing the last game before an international break. It would be unbearable if that happened. So, yeah, you're right. It's fantastic that everybody's getting behind the club. We've mentioned Johnny Blaine, who I've worked with for a number of years. He's a brilliant statistician, and he's, I've noticed, just posted a good one here. 18 shots on target in our last 2 matches. That follows 18 in the previous 6. So that's why we've got good cause to be optimistic ahead of Sunday. He also says 11 on target, which we managed last night, is the most in a home match this season. Well, let's try and better that on Sunday. Just a final word about Igor Tudor, and I don't want to get into the weeds of it because we're being optimistic. You know, he's turned things around extraordinarily. We thought he was a dead man walking after what happened in Madrid, the point at Liverpool, the win last night. Now, if the worst happens on Sunday, George, where do we then find ourselves? Does it all come down to the manner of the performance, or if Spurs lose to Forest, despite these recent shoots of recovery, do you think the club would look to do something during that sort of enforced period of nobody having a match to worry about?
Don't ask me, Marcus, because I would have given him his P45 after Atletico. So I'm just talking nonsense these days. No, look, I think he was clearly was a dead man walking after Atletico. He'd lost 4 in a row. The kind of comments he'd said, the manner of the Kinski, putting him in, taking him off, not acknowledging him as he came off, which he did later clarify very well, actually, and said that in that situation, if he'd gone over to Kinski and Kinski had understandably been angry and reacted, it would have made it so much more of a bigger storm. So I can understand a little bit his logic there. I think I would have still liked him to have given that Kinski a pat on the back, but there we go. But no, look, the ship was sinking, wasn't it? HMS Tottenham was sinking, and Igor Tudor has managed to stop it. And let's hope. I think we all
hang on, George. I'm getting worried again. You're sounding like Thomas Frank with a super tanker turning around. I'm not sure these analogies are very good ones at the moment.
It's fine. Igor Tudor is going to dock the boat. He's going to dock us in the Premier League. It's going to be fine. No, look, I think it clearly comes back to the manner of the performance and the manner of the result. I'm not going to manifest scenarios that it goes wrong for Tottenham on Sunday, but if it did go badly wrong, then I think there probably would be a conversation again about Igor Tudor's future. But to give him a lot of the dues that I think he deserves for these last two results and performances, he has started to get a tune out of this squad. And let's not forget, it was a squad last night with about 11 players. They're probably going to be missing again 8 or 9 for the Nottingham Forest game. He is working with a real small group. And his words and his comments, and I've kind of been worried about how they would have been taken. You either cry or fight, can't be a victim. The players have responded to them over the last 2 games. And I think there is a realisation now at the club, when it comes to the players, when it comes to the staff, the key figures, they know the situation we're in. And I think, there's no more hiding place. There's no more excuses. I think we all hope Igor Tudor can be the man to do this, and Spurs don't have to have a third manager this season. 3 weeks is certainly the time to make the change if they want to. But let's hope that they don't have to when Spurs round off this week with the type of performance and the first Premier League win of 2026 that we all really want to see.
Absolutely. As we record this, the sun is shining in London. Spring has arrived, and that is reflected by the last 2 performances of Spurs. George, thank you very much. Rest your voice so that you can start the sing-song on Sunday. And don't forget, it's We'll Take More Care of You, Archie Gray. I want to hear that on Sunday afternoon, guys.
Absolutely. Just one final point, and Marcus, I'm sure you'll join me on this. I guess I'll call them a rival. A rival Tottenham podcast, View from the Lane. Their host is Danny Kelly, and he's a wonderful broadcaster. I'm sure every Tottenham fan will be well aware of Danny Kelly. Incredible voice when it comes to Tottenham. He very bravely announced on Wednesday that he's suffering with cancer and is going to be sort of coming off the TalkSport airways. And I don't believe he'll be doing the last View from the Lane as much over the next few months whilst he has to go for his recovery. But I'm sure, Marcus, you join me, everyone at the Tottenham Way, and I'm sure all our subscribers and listeners will all send Danny Kelly the very best and wish him the best in his battle with cancer. And hopefully Tottenham can give him a few wins over the next couple of weeks and months to help with his recovery.
That's a great point, George. Well done. Yeah, I've known Danny, not well, but known him for 30-odd years. He's been a regular fixture. His love for the club is very obvious. So, yeah, fight hard, Danny, and hopefully you'll be back and raring to go sooner rather than later. Thank you, George. Thank you, everybody, for listening wherever you are in the world. We love your company. Please continue to like, to subscribe. You know that you can follow us in all sorts of different ways. Get your questions and your observations coming in ahead of our March Q&A. There will be a gap. Obviously, what happens on Sunday afternoon will be a key component in what we discuss over the next couple of weeks. But things are looking better at last. George Sessions from the Press Association. I'm Marcus Buckland. Let me say it with gusto. Come on, you Spurs.